We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Samech Daled Amud Aleph Meseches Bava Basra. This is Bava Basra Daf 164a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara quoted the teaching of Rav that if you have a document and the signatures that are all written on paper that's already been erased one time, that is still kosher. And the Gemara now continues and asks, Vim Tomer, now if you're going to ask, Mochik v'chozer mochik, if you can write it on erased paper, so he'll write up the whole document on paper that's already been erased once, and he'll sign the witnesses on that paper as well, and then he'll just erase the top a second time and write in whatever he wants. And to that the Gemara says, Eino doma nimchak pamachas lenimchak shtei pamim. You can't compare paper that's been erased one time to paper that's been erased two times. It's going to be obvious that the area where the witnesses are signed, that was only erased once, but the area on top of that was erased twice. You'll be able to compare the two parts of the paper, and therefore we are not concerned that that will happen. And the Gemara continues, but we should still be concerned. Maybe what he'll do is as follows. On the area where the witness is signed, he'll throw on some ink from the beginning, and then he'll erase it, so it will have actually been erased two times. So now, when he goes ahead and erases the top, so both of them are going to have been erased two times, and so therefore it should still be a problem. And the Gemara says to that, Abaya says, Rav, it's because Rav holds, the witnesses will not sign on an erased part of the parchment, unless they see that it was erased in front of them. So there's not going to be a situation where they're going to sign on a paper that's already been erased and it was erased twice, and that way this person will be able to go ahead and erase the top, and then that will also be erased twice. That is not a concern. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following Brisa. Hu al haniyor ve'edav al mechak kosher. It says in the Brisa, let's say you have the text on the paper, it's not erased, and then you have the witnesses on an erased part of the paper, that is kosher. And so the Gemara asks, according to Rav, we should be concerned. What he might do is, he's going to erase the top of the paper, write whatever he wants. And then what's going to happen is, the text of the document and the witnesses will be on the same erased kind of paper. It will all have been erased once. That should be a concern, according to Rav. And the Gemara says to that, the Kasvi Hachi, the Gemara says, when the Brisa says that the Edom can sign on an erased part of the paper, even though the top of the document is not erased, they have to write as follows. They have to write the words, Anachna Sahadi Chosamna Al Mochka, that we, the witnesses, we signed on an erased part of the paper. Ushtara Kasav Al Niyara, and the shtar itself was written on the regular paper. That way there's a notation that that is the case, so we don't have such a concern. But the Gemara says, 1 second, the Kasvi Heich, well, if the witnesses are going to write this on the paper, where on the paper are they writing this? If they write it in the bottom of the paper, so Guy is late, so he'll just cut that off. You won't have that notation anymore. And so again, we're back to the same problem. According to Rav, he'll just erase the top part of the document and put whatever he wants over there. And now if the witnesses are going to write it above, so then it's the same problem. He's just going to erase that along with the rest of the paper that he erases, and again write in whatever he wants. So you can't have them write that on the bottom, and you can't have them write that on the top. And the Gemara says, the kasvi bein sahada l'sahada. What they'll do is, they'll write it between the names of the witnesses. You have two witnesses, and between that, you'll have a little notation that says that, again, they signed on an erased part of the paper, and that the text itself is on an unerased part of the paper, and that will be a solution. But the Gemara continues, if so, ema seifa. Let's look at the end of this very same Brisa. And the end of the Brisa brings the reverse case. Hu al mechak. Let's say the text is on an erased part of the paper. The edav al haniyor, and the witnesses, they sign on the paper on an unerased part of the paper. Puzzle, that actually is disqualified. And so the Gemara says, 1 second. On my puzzle, why should it be puzzle? If we're talking here where the edim can write in some kind of a notation, do the same thing over here. Hachanami over here as well. Nichtavu hachi, they should write as follows. Anachna sahadi chasamna al niyara. We, the witnesses, we signed on the paper, it was not erased. Ushtar al mochka, and then the document that was on an erased part of the paper, and then we'll know exactly what's happening. And the Gemara continues, Hashtanami mayamrit. So in this case, what are you going to say? What are you going to respond is the problem? That mochik chozer mochik, that what he'll do is, he'll just erase it now, it'll be a second time erased, and write whatever he wants, but that won't be a problem. Ha'amr, didn't you just say above, Eino doma nimchak pamachas lenimchak shtei pamim, there's no comparison to something that's erased one time to something that's erased two times, and so we will be able to tell that this area, if the guy tries to erase it a second time and put in whatever he wants, we'll be able to tell that it wasn't erased once, rather it was erased twice, so why should that be a problem? And the Gemara says, no, hani mili heicha dechasimi sahadi amochka. When we say that you can't compare something that's erased one time to something that's erased two times, that would be talking about a situation where within that document, the witnesses, let's say the text of the document and the witnesses were all on paper that was erased once, and then you go ahead and try to erase the top of the document and change the context, the content, and then you'll have a situation where the top is erased twice and the bottom is erased once. There already ain't no doma. There already we can tell, we'll be able to see what happened because we can compare the top of the document to the bottom of the document. That's in such a situation. But if you have a situation where the witnesses did not sign on the erased portion of the paper, ella aniyara, rather they just signed on the part of the paper that was not erased, so the top was erased and the bottom was not, now you're going to erase the top a second time, no one is going to know. Lo yediyah, no one's going to know that it was erased twice as opposed to erased once if you have nothing to compare it to. But the Gemara says, okay, why not? Why not just bring another scroll, v'limchog, and just erase that? V'linmi, just compare the two. You should be able to tell. This one will look different than the other one, and therefore you'll know this one was erased once, and the other one was erased twice. The Gemara says that won't work either. Lo dami mochka da hamigilta, la mochka da hamigilta. You can't compare how one scroll looks when it's erased to another scroll. You can't compare one to another. That will not be a solution. But the Gemara still continues and asks, why not certify the signature of these witnesses in Bezin, so therefore we won't lose out if we go ahead and we erase where the witnesses have signed. V'limchok, and then we should erase the area where the witnesses signed. V'lidmi, and we should write something there and then compare the top to the bottom. Then we'll be able to see whether the top has been erased once or twice. And so therefore, again, in this situation where the witnesses sign on the unerased part of the paper and the text is on the erased part of the paper, we should still accept it because we can do this in order to test it out. And the Gemara says to that, Amar Rav Hoshia says that's also not a solution because Eino Doma Nimchak Ben Yomo, you can't compare something that was erased and it's just a day old, Lenimchak Ben Shnei Yomim, to something that was erased 2 days ago. So even if you're going to do this, if you're going to erase the witnesses' signatures at the bottom and then write something in and try to compare the bottom to the top, it still won't prove anything because this was just erased today. The other part was erased earlier. But the Gemara still says Vilashaya, so why not just wait a day or two, and now they'll all have been erased for more than a day. You'll be able to compare the top and the bottom and make sure that the top was not erased a second time. But the Gemara ultimately still says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Chayshinan lebezin toin, we're afraid that Bezin might make a mistake in doing this analysis, and therefore in such a situation where the Edom are signed on the part of the paper that is not erased, and you have the content of the document written on the part of the paper that was erased one time, we are concerned ultimately that the person might go ahead and erase it a second time, and we won't be able to do any test to discern between being erased once and being erased twice in this situation, and that's why it's considered puzzle in this case. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says, Mekusher v'chudu, if you have a document that's mekusher, that's folded and tied, even if you have the witnesses on the inside of the document, which is usually not how you're supposed to sign a document that's mekusher, but Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel says it's still kosher because you can simply unsew it, you untie it, and now you'll just use it as a regular document. And the Gemara says, Heishiv Rebbe l'divrei Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel. Rebbe challenged what Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel said, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Kuf Samech Dalid Amud Beis.